morning. Okay, so this morning's reading is from Psalm 84, verses 1 to 10a. For the director of music, according to Gittith, of the sons of Korah, a psalm. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young, a place near your altar, Lord Almighty, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they may make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. Hear my prayer, Lord God Almighty. Listen to me, God of Jacob. Look on our shield, O God. Look with favor on your anointed one. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere.
Yeah. Thank you, Joy. Good morning, church. My name is Nikki. It's great to be with you this morning. I was just chatting to Dorothy as we were greeting each other, and she was talking about how hectic her week has been and how she's been traveling and she's feeling tired. And I just told her she's in the right place, because this morning we're going to be talking on home and rest. And we are in this series called Look at the Birds, and I'm just finding it so refreshing. God is so encouraging, and he's using his word and his works to talk to us. He's using his word through scripture and his works through nature. We're going to look at the sparrows this morning and what they can teach us about rest and home. So we're going to look at two kind of big ideas. The first is the city is a great place to live. And the second idea is that it is possible to live with deep and sufficient rest right here in the center of the city of Joburg. So I lived in London for 7 years, and I learned very early on that you would fit in quite well if you were just kind of in a little bit of a rush all the time. And if you weren't in a rush, you just needed to look like you were in a rush. In fact, while you were rushing or pretending to rush, maybe you're on your way down the tube stairs to the station, or you're on your way to your destination, every now and again, if you just kind of quickly looked at your watch and looked just a tiny bit irritated, then you could really be awarded the endearing impression of a true Londoner. But don't look too rushed, don't look too flustered, always orderly. Don't strike up a conversation with anyone unless it's just a really small comment about the weather. And make sure when you are at the train station, if you're looking at the train schedule, if you have to wait more than 2 minutes for the next tube, you kind of are allowed to give a little grimace. I remember many evenings when I rushed all the way home from work, I just slammed the door behind me and I was kind of like, oh, well, I'm home now. And, I just got into this habit of rushing, and I was hit with the silence and no appointment that I was really late for. And I do remember, actually, my mom, she's a really chatty person. She's a real extrovert. She's a super welcoming kind of person to be around, and she's always extending herself. And I remember going to fetch her from Heathrow. She was coming to visit, and I remember as we were about to get on the tube, the tube's a public transport system there, I kind of sat her down, and I put my hands on her shoulders. I was like, Mom, we're going to go home now. So I just want to tell you something, I need you to keep your head down. I need you to have a sense of urgency about you. I want you to just tone down the happiness a little bit, and then you're going to be fine. We're going to get there. I say all of this, I actually loved my time in London. It's an amazing city, and in the right spaces, it's a super friendly place to live. I love the constant energy of the place. I love the diversity, people from all corners of the globe living together. It's such a special city, and I really do miss it. But I did lead a very fast-paced life when I lived there. It was also the season of life that I was in. But I fast forward to living in Joburg, and I can see so many similarities in this city living. I'm not in the public transport system anymore, but I am armed and ready with my foot on the accelerator for the moment that the robot turns green, because if you do not press straight away, you will hear and feel the rage of the hooter behind you, maybe even 2 or 3. But it's a different kind of busy, but it's busy all the same. And cities are just busy places to live, and we are all moaning about the busyness. It's just something that we all do. You can feel it, you can feel it in the traffic, you can feel it on your phone, you can feel it in the alerts coming through, in the emails. And, sometimes I think rest is something that we just hope for, and rest is something that we really have to fight for. And I think sometimes we can feel like we're maybe just not keeping up. We can feel like we have conflict in that. And I think often, I know I certainly have had feelings where I thought, actually, I'd like to maybe live somewhere else. And that conflict, I think if we took it to God, I wonder what he would say about that conflict that we feel as we wrestle with these things. One thing we do know, we know how God feels about cities. Cities were his idea. He speaks of heaven, something that has been on his mind always, as the New Jerusalem, this holy city being the ultimate fulfillment of all of his promises. The idea of the city, how it came together, is not an accident. It was ordained by God. And on earth, God designed cities as places where people could flee to for safety, for refuge, for mercy, for justice, for help, places they could come to when they were feeling maybe exposed or hurt or alienated out in the wilderness. And cities then and cities now are places, where people can connect through trade and influence, and people can learn from each other. They can come and seek wise and good counsel. It's a place where God really should be glorified. And we learn throughout the Bible that God has a huge heart for cities. You think about Jonah, right? Jonah is a book in the Bible about his heart to rescue the city of Nineveh. And when Jonah went to Nineveh and he preached to everybody and they repented and they turned from their sin and they followed God, God was glorified. And there's so many cases in the Bible where God calls people out of their comforts, out of their familiar places, and he calls them into the city. And we can just see that because of that, and we see how he operates, we know that his heart for the city is so big. And his heart for the city is so big because his heart for people is so big. His love for people is huge. And the city as we know it today is still doing good things. It's a place where laws are made. It's where culture is celebrated. But sin has entered cities. And cities have become places of great brokenness, great beauty, but great brokenness. And the original purposes are just not being lived out because human beings are being glorified and not God. More than half the world lives in cities. It's kind of like every 3 out of 4 people. And not everyone is called to live in a city, and not everybody is called to move to the city, but many, many are. So I want to ask the question this morning, if it's God's invention, God's design, why is it so hard for us to make a home here? Why is it so hard for us to actually have rest and refuge and joy as we do that? So we are made to be here right where you are right now. And we look at the city, and we kind of, I don't know if you do this, but I kind of sometimes list things I want to change first before I really want to make a home here. The traffic this and the crime that. But I want to say that waiting for that change to happen before you really put your feet down, before you really decide this is going to be home, it's going to just lead to a life of absolute discontent. We can make a content life here. Do you know how we can do that? We can do that when we let the gospel change how we live in the city. When we live as if we are on mission to restore the city to its original design, instead of conforming, to popular culture. And it seems like the narrow road, and I want to say this morning, it is the narrow road, but it is also the road that leads to life. And cities are places of growth, right? You look at young adults that all study. Once they've studied or once they venture into the working world, they kind of head to the city. That's our next generation. That's who we want to reach. Professionals, people who are changing our culture, people who are informing our culture, they're in the city. They carry great influence. The poor are in the city, and God cares and loves for the poor, and he wants them to be cared for, and he wants them to be loved. And cities can actually be really hard places to live in, because we're constantly confronted with new things, right? New ways of doing things, new ways of seeing things, and we've got to work that out within ourselves. And I think often there's conflict as we do that, because we are called to resist so much, but we're also called to live amongst it, and that's not easy. But we're never going to flourish if we just see the city as like a bad, evil place. It's so important to remember God gave us cities as a good thing. We messed it up. But they're places where we come to meet God. They're places where people come to love and serve and know him. In the early times, Paul planted churches in cities. That's what he did. He went to a city, he planted a church, he reached them. He went to another city, he planted a church, he reached them. And we've got to look at our work here. As we work and live in this big city of Josie, God is preparing a big city for us to finish in. And there's this beautiful link that will lead, just that in itself will lead to much peace in your life as you think about that for a long time. Psalm 48 verse 2 refers to this heavenly city as the joy of the whole earth. There can be joy for us right here, right now. See, God wouldn't design the city for us if we couldn't find a home here. And one of the ways we're able to find a home and one of the ways we're able to be content here is actually when we realize that this is not our forever home. It's not our ultimate home. And it never will be. And there's like such a release in that, you know. Cities are places where we can find a base. We can hang our hat here. It's the most incredible mission field. And we can go on mission. And you know, you don't need to go to Sudan. You just need to go to your neighbor. Maybe you just need to knock on your daughter's door with a cup of coffee and your Bible. Tim Keller, he wrote an amazing paper. It was called The Theology of Cities. It's really worth reading if you are feeling in conflict about how to live in this city. And he said in there, in the village, you might win 1 or 2 lawyers to Christ, and that's amazing. But if you want to win the legal profession, you need to go to the city where you have law schools, law journals published, laws made, and on it goes. Psalm 84, how lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints for the courts of the Lord. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself where she may have her young, a place near your altar, Lord Almighty, my King and my God. We're going to learn from the sparrows this morning. The sparrows do something so well. They find a spot, they settle down. It might be a bit messy. They may have to use old and secondhand material to do that. And I'm sure many of those nests that we see in the city would look so much better in the arm of a tree in the country. But you know that sparrows are just made for so much more than their nesting place. They are made for community, and they're made to fly. And lots of them, look, they settle everywhere, all over the world, but a lot of them settle in the city. They're super social birds. They are often nesting in very big groups, and they're adaptable. They've been found, I think I read, they've been found living and breeding in a coal mine 2,000 feet underground. And some of them will actually, you know, they'll lead their whole lives living in like the rafters of a church building or the rafters of a shopping center, quite content to just be there and do that. They are found all over the city, and they're actually known as pests, just doing their thing, you know, right in the middle of the city. You could, you know, maybe you're walking out of Braamfontein train station and you could look up and you could just see a nest and you can kind of think to yourself, hey man, you just don't belong there. It's quite cheeky of you to be there. Their nests are untidy and they damage crops, and you know they're actually known by birders as LBJs, which is little brown jobs. Not very attractive at all. And you know, it's you know, for us when we're in the park, we love the bush. If you've got your binos on and you're looking at the bird life, if you see a sparrow, you just go straight past. You don't even look closely at it. And it's interesting because when they fly, that's when they are just simply stunning. They're so fast, they love to fly. They're very aerodynamic, and they were designed to fly. You know, their bones are hollow, almost hollow, so they can take the air easily. They're so light, and they have exceptionally strong hearts, you know, so they're on the go, they're flying a lot, but they're made for that. Their hearts are strong. I think their heart beats 7 times, or just more than 7 times a second. So they're so fragile, but they're so strong at the same time. And you know what Jesus said about sparrows? He said they are loved, cherished, remembered, and protected. He chose the most scruffy of birds, not even considered worthy to look at by bird watchers, to remind us that, you know what, his eye is on them. How much more are we valued by God? He's proved his love for us by the cross, you know, how much value we hold to him. And look at what he says about the sparrow. What's he saying about us? We'll be able to make a home here, just like the sparrow, content, at rest and at peace when we realize that the city itself will never give us deep rest, no matter how much we conform to what it offers us. So the fact that I think sometimes, you know, you can feel a bit unsettled. Sometimes you can feel a bit uncomfortable here. Sometimes you can feel like there's other places you would rather live. I think part of that uncomfortableness is actually really healthy. And I think much of that thinking will be corrected and put in the right perspective when you are in the right community. You see, the sparrows thrive in community, and it's so important that it's not about being in the perfect place for them, but it's about being in the right community. Your right community is this church, doing what you were designed to do, first to love the Lord your God, and then to serve and to love others around you. You will find common ground with these people. And as you find common ground, wrestling stuff out, wrestling why you are in the world but not of it, you'll find a home. You see, our ultimate comfort and forever home is not here at all. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says he has set eternity in the human heart. That's what he's done. He set eternity, not he set the earth and all it has to offer in your heart. No, he set eternity. And what he said in our hearts, that's actually right in front of us, that's in the here and the now, is community. First and foremost with him, and then with others. And the city is an amazing place to live that out. With all the challenges we face, there are pockets here of absolute excellence. There are thriving multicultural spaces. There are new inventions always on the brim. And if you've got the right eyes, and if you start to really look and really think about it, you'll see that the city is a place you need more than it demands of you. In the same paper, Tim Keller wrote this. He said, the city of God is marked by God's shalom, his peace. His peace is a place where stewardship of God, creation, justice, compassion, and righteousness lead to harmony and family building and cultural development under God. Christians are to see the earthly city as something to love and something to win. They are to win it by seeking its shalom and seeking to spread the city of God within it and to battle the city of Satan within it. We are to see to it that though the fight between these two kingdoms happens everywhere in the world, no matter where you find yourself, no matter what city you're in, whether you live in the city or in the countryside, earthly cities are the flashpoints on the battle lines, the places where the fighting is most intense and where the war can be won. I think that's so encouraging. I think it's so exciting. I feel like when you pause and you really reflect on that, it's something that can energize us and it's something that can make us feel motivated. But I also think that you may think, oh, that's great. I love that. I want to win the war here. But do you know how much I'm carrying in my own life? How many little wars I'm fighting just in my own heart, in the four walls of my home? And now I'm excited about what the city means. And I'd love to do more. I see the vision, I catch it. I see God's heart for the city, but I'm so tired. I don't know how I can take anything more on the shoulders that I am carrying. I've got so many burdens and I'm weary already, and I'm excited by that idea. I just don't know how I can take on more. And it just brings me to my second point this morning. When we talk about the city, when we talk about themes like this, like home, it should inspire feelings of rest when you talk about home. Home shouldn't, Tim Keller's paper talking about the city of God marked by his peace. That should inspire feelings of rest as we look at that. So why does it feel so far away from us? For me, even in this current city, I'm not sure I have these inspired feelings of rest when I think about living in Joburg. How do I change that? How do I change how I feel about that? And we're going to start by looking at the sparrows again. Luke 12:6-7 says, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, yet not one of them is forgotten by God? Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth far more than sparrows. What God is saying, what he's reminding us of in this passage, is his love and his care and his provision for us. He's the one that provides the rest as we walk in response to what he's done for us on the cross. How does that play out as we, take on serving the city, as our shoulders get more heavy laden, as we take on more things? I want to look at Matthew 11:28-30. Jesus says, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This is an invitation for us this morning. It's done in the form of a metaphor. And, I read quite a few commentaries on these verses, and all of them referred to this as an invitation, so I will submit to that. But I want to say in my own heart, I feel like it's a command. It's saying, come to me. It's not saying, listen, hey, how's about this for an option as you consider everything out there? Would you like to maybe use one of your options as coming to me for your rest? He's saying, no, come to me. I am your option. Come to me for your rest. There is no other place you're going to find it. And Jesus, he gets, through these passages, you can feel that he really gets that it's not just about one good night's sleep. It's a weariness that we have in us. It's in our bones. It penetrates our life. It's not just a physical feeling. And when Jesus says, all who are labor and are heavy laden, he's really pointing to this idea that we all have it. All of us are weary in one way or another. And one of the reasons for this is that in some areas of our lives, things are just not going according to our perfect plan. And we're finding ways to excel. We're finding ways to prove ourselves. We're finding ways to get onto the other sides of obstacles. And you know what's happening? As we're busy doing that, as we're working out how to excel, as we're working out how to get through this problem, as we're working out how to reach that goal that we have, we are establishing real connections with these things. And we're connected to all kinds of things in this city, things that are wearing us out. And what that means is that we're actually yoked to them. Being yoked to something means being harnessed to something. And that's what's making us weary. A yoke is from the Greek word zugos, and it refers to a wooden yoke that joined two animals together so that they could combine strength to pull a load that would have been too much for one animal to pull alone. The harness eased the work of hauling a load on your own. And this is the metaphor Jesus is using to illustrate to us two things. First, we are all yoked to something. And secondly, it should be to him. He said, take my yoke. This kind of intimates that we need to exchange the yoke of whatever it is we are harnessed to and exchange it for his yoke. I think many of us feel like we can't live up to expectations, maybe expectations placed on us by others, and maybe it's expectations that we place on ourselves. I think we're pretty good at that. This invitation is to put down that heavy yoke and put on his yoke. And it's not about putting down the yoke that we're carrying and kind of walking away with no responsibility at all. No, we have responsibilities. Jesus means putting on his yoke. He says, listen, put on my yoke. I'm gentle and I'm light. Following him won't weigh you down like other yokes will, like looking for approval, like valuing someone else's opinion, like holding on to your youth or glorifying power or people-pleasing. You have his approval. You have his high opinion of you. You have his power. You have his grace. You have his good plans for your life as you are yoked with him. And the work that we take on our shoulders when we are in his yoke, do you know what? It's fitting. And you are more than capable to carry out his work. Why? Because he bears majority of the load. It's kind of like a veteran ox with a young ox in the yoke for the first time. You know, naturally the veteran's going to walk in the right direction. Even in the yoke, we start to follow his lead. Do you see that? He's been on that path before. In fact, he made the path. And with him right at your side, you know, as you look to Jesus, he can lift that burden. He can lift his shoulders, and he places more of the weight on himself. And you know what that signifies? It signifies that you can have rest right in the middle of a trial. The yoke of Jesus is light because it's the yoke of faith. It's saying, Lord, I'm just going to trust you for whatever happens and wherever you're taking me. And I'm not going to trust in myself. Whatever it is that's making you weary, it's because you're yoked to that thing. Pulling loads and shouldering burdens, in the end, you know what it points to? It points to our doing. Here's an example, right? So I'm a mum. My children take up a huge part of my heart. When bad things happen to them, or maybe they're facing a challenge, or whatever it might be, it affects me. I get emotional, and I start to think of ways that I can help them through their hurts. Maybe I can help them to reach their goal, or their challenge, or whatever it might be, and I put a load on as I do that, right? Carry a burden. And I've learned a lot over the years, but I will say that when the kids were very little, Chris and I, you know, often used to talk about them when they went to bed, and if they were facing hard stuff or chasing a goal, whatever it was, Chris would often say, depending on which child we were talking about, he would often say, you know, this is so good for her. It's going to give her deep roots. And I'll be honest, I really did not like that comment for a long time. So I didn't really give great feedback to that, and I felt frustrated. But actually, how awesome that we could use those opportunities to teach them about God in those moments, about his nature as her father, who loves and cares. And I think one of the things we really got to do in those moments is teach our kids about God's economy, something they didn't know about before, and his goodness, and what a godly response to things looks like, about a different world that they didn't know about yet. I remember Hannah going through a particular little something. It wasn't a big thing, but in her little life it really was. And I remember as a father, Chris led her so well during that time. I remember him sitting her down and speaking to her about Jesus, just a lot about Jesus and way less about her problem, the thing that she was going through. He used the obstacle to prompt and to probe her relationship with Jesus, and he would talk to her about who he was. He would testify about his goodness in his own life. He would pray with her and chat to her about what a godly response would look like. And when he popped to the kitchen to get a little drink for the two of them, and I was just hanging around in the background, and I would kind of just say, but I mean, like, what about if you just told her to do, or what if we actually just, and every time he would look at me and he would be like, we don't need to tell her to do anything except put her trust in Jesus and let him lead her. She's 14 now. She really does still have so much to learn. And she's going to make a lot of mistakes along the way, but she knows Jesus, and she is really making some great decisions in how she leads her life. And I can see, I can see little burdens when they come, into her life. I can see that now they are being met with a quiet strength. But it's taken some learning. It's taken some learning that God is trustworthy every time. And she's been in church forever. She's grown up in church. And she's had Sunday school, and she's had youth group, and she's got a mentor now, Rencha, who's one of the youth leaders, who pours into her, is constantly talking to her about Jesus. She has us at home. We're also doing our best to teach her all the time. But I want to tell you, it's through her burdens where I've seen her exercise her faith. It's through her burdens I've seen her test her knowledge of God, where his peace and his rest become real to her. And it's built strength. And it's allowed her to have peace as she tackles more challenges going forward. And in those moments, I think she's just remembering who she's harnessed to. And when she come up, Elizabeth Elliot, she said, peace is as infectious as panic. If my soul is quietly at rest in God, others will share my peace because I share his. How did that burden get lifted off my shoulders as I kind of had concerns for my kids, as I carried weight about what they might be facing? Chris was right. I had some catching up to do. I had to exchange those burdens for his burden. Take my yoke, my burden, and exchange it for his, because his yoke was easy and it was light. And you know what his burden was? During those times, his burden was like, I have great plans and purposes for her. His burden was, I am far better and more capable parent than you ever will be. She's yoked to me, and I see what you don't. And I know the path I'm leading her on. I know the plans I have for her. That's a burden I had to carry. I'll take that. I'll carry that. And you know what? It allowed me to just kind of give it up a little bit, the concerns, the burdens that I was carrying, and it allowed me to rest, have peace, and have a capacity to take on other things. His eye is on the sparrow, and his eye is really on you. We're so valued by God, and he's proved his love for us on the cross. Not only did he die for us, but he actually gave himself to us. He said, take my yoke upon you. That's how we live in this beautiful, chaotic, broken, powerful, beautiful city of Josie. Living in this city is a gift. And you know that you can thrive right here, right now, right where you find yourself. I want to challenge you to make a nest here. But don't be too concerned with what it looks like. This is not your forever home. Be like the sparrows who just look most beautiful when they're doing what they're made to do. Living in community, flying in their groups and their colonies. That's what they're made for. We are made to love God and then to love and serve the people around us, to live in community, to love our families, and to love this great city. And I want to tell you, as we do that, he is able and he is strong to lift the burdens off your shoulders as you trust him. Give him your yes. And let the gospel do the hard work. And you'll feel the same as those sparrows. Let's pray.